A short introduction. My name is Suet Mansouri, Project Manager. This is Alexander Boes, Advertising Specialist. He will answer your questions during the webinar in the chat. And last but not least, Robin van Meel will be given the webinar, Google Analytics 4. I would like to hand over to Robin, who will take you into the wonderful world of Google Analytics 4.
Hello, thank you very much. Lovely that everyone can spend some time today to join the webinar. Today, we're going to talk about a few topics, and after that, we will close off with a short little demo of Google's merchandise store, just to show you how the platform works, where you can find certain reports, etc. So let's get right into it. First off, let's talk about what GA4 actually is. Well, hopefully most of you know. It's a web/app analytics tool, and GA4 is the newest version of that tool. What's different in it is they've come out with some machine learning capabilities, a new event model. It offers quite more flexibility in terms of what you can track, how to use specific customer segmentations to actually analyze your data, and it also includes quite some capabilities on campaign attribution. So in order to actually know where specific conversions come from, you can attribute that conversion over multiple different sessions for a user's journey. So, of course, some of you might be familiar with universal analytics. An easy question you would have after that is what is different between UA and GA4. So let's just go through some of the main differences here. Universal analytics was a hit-based data model, and now GA4 is moving to a fully event-based data model. I'll get a little bit further into what that exactly means during the demo, but for now, just know that everything in GA4 is classified as an event, essentially. It helps with simplifying some cross-domain or cross-platform tracking. So, for example, subdomains are standard, always already tracked within a GA4 property. It allows you to track through the same data stream specific apps, for example, or other websites that you all want to combine into one property. It has, as I said before, some machine learning capabilities. This is great for predicting what will happen in the future. It's also quite good for understanding that if you miss some data due to, for example, some privacy regulation, the machine learning algorithm is able to make certain assertions about your data and fill in the gaps where you think something might be missing. As I also briefly mentioned in my previous point, privacy and control is, of course, a very big topic, and GA4 offers you some improved versions of that. Things like consent mode, limiting whether you want to share ad data with Google, for example, or not. You have particular features to control when and when not to share these data. You also have a great feature called enhanced measurement. If you're not too familiar with Tag Manager and custom event tracking yourself, this is a great feature because it automatically tracks specific website interactions like clicks, scrolls, etc. So you don't have to actually make custom events of that yourself. And lastly, we strongly advise migrating to GA4 as soon as possible because there is a phase-out time, and that time is approaching quite rapidly as well. So what is the exact timeline? Well, for all standard universal properties, it's the 1st of July of this year. If you happen to have the luxury of owning a 360 account, then you can extend this deadline to 1st of July of next year in 2024. Okay, so let's talk about general concepts of the GA4 setup and configuration. You have certain assets that need to be configured. You have accounts, you have properties, and data streams. So account is the highest level asset within Google Analytics. All properties, they fall under an account, and all data streams, they fall under a property. Certain things that you should be aware of when setting up these assets is that you need to make sure that you accept the data protection terms, the data collection acknowledgement, as these are agreements with Google in order to make the processing of customer data fully legal and in line with GDPR. So a property, that is essentially where multiple sources of data are being measured. As I said, you can have, for example, an app, you can have a website. It can all be funneled into one property. And from that property, you eventually start to analyze the data that you're collecting in there. Through the use of data streams, you actually funnel the data to your property. And so there is some configuration on the data stream necessary, but in general, the setup is quite simple. They also have a setup assistant for you if you'd like to follow that instead. Very briefly, let's talk about the admin interface. There's a few little tabs here on your screen now. Far to the left, we have an admin banner. This essentially follows you throughout all the reports in GA4. So once you click on that admin button, some other screens will pop up, and that you see here in the middle and on the right screenshots. You have the account level settings, you have the property level settings, and as well you have some product links. The product links, they are connected to each property. So if you have multiple properties, then you can link the different products to your properties in different ways. For example, Google Ads, you can connect the property so that it shares data between the two tools. BigQuery, for example, it's great for exporting data to a large data warehouse system. Search Console, you can connect that to your property. There's a lot of different connections available. I think it's more of a case-by-case basis whether you actually need this or not, but they are very useful in general. Okay, so let's look at some of the custom resources that you're able to work with within GA4. Of course, not every company's measurement funnel is the same, so you have the option to tailor specific event tracking based on your website or based on your app. You can do that with the placing of events. Now, you might be used to Universal Analytics, which you can also create custom events in Universal Analytics themselves without the need of a tag manager. You can do the same thing in GA4. So what used to be goals in Universal Analytics are now conversions. And every event can be labeled as a conversion. So like I said, everything in GA4 is an event. Some events can be labeled as a special event, and this is where the conversion comes into play. Important thing about conversions is that they benefit from attribution models, which we'll get into a bit later. On top of that, you can create some custom dimensions and metrics. Dimensions would be very useful, for example, if within your customer journey, you would like to scrape some extra data from your website where users potentially fill in some information or they select some drop-downs in the UI elements. Whenever this event occurs, you can actually capture that data and put it into your custom dimensions in Google Analytics. The same thing applies with metrics. So if you have some kind of counter that you would like to sum for all your events, potentially there's an amount of revenue that you would like to link to certain events. Maybe you say that your organization considers a particular click on a certain landing page to be to have a certain amount of value. Then you can assign a value to that event and then eventually make a custom metric of that so that you can use it in your reporting. One amazing feature of GA4 is the Explore feature. This is new to GA4. Essentially, it's a quick way of making ad hoc queries on your original data set of Google Analytics. So if you ever want to know any quick information about what users are doing on your website, quickly check what the difference is between specific segments, see how your measured events are coming in for particular campaigns, or any other ad hoc queries, like I said, this is the place to do it. I will show you how to actually use this tool in the demo, so we'll get back to this. But it's I would say the core feature of GA4 is one of these Explore features that you can later discover for yourself as well. Okay, so besides the Explore feature, there's also advertising reports. This is also a very powerful part of GA4. There's a model comparison report. And in this model comparison report, you can actually, as the name suggests, compare your attribution models to see if you choose a certain one. For example, I think the standard one is always data-driven. You might be familiar with Google ads that very popular ones are, for example, first or last click models. Essentially, what this determines is when you have a candidate journey that eventually converts, so they for example apply for a job on your vacancy page or something over multiple stages, so multiple days, multiple sessions. The attribution model actually determines which touch point within that journey gets a certain weighted amount for that conversion. Once you actually understand the different attribution models and know how they work, you can look at the conversion paths that users take. So eventually, let's say you've been measuring some data for, let's say, a quarter, 3 months, and you have 100 conversions. You can analyze the path that users took to eventually get to their conversion and use those learnings in your marketing efforts later on. It's a great way to see which certain points of contact on your website are actually pushing people to convert or not. Another great feature, at least if you have linked your advertiser platform to Google Analytics, is that you can compare the different ad costs that you've spent for conversions. You can, of course, filter this as well. So if you have certain audiences that you've built up, you can check, hey, how are my different audiences converting? Which are the most cost-effective ones to push forward? And this will, of course, also affect your marketing efforts. I think the largest benefit to advertising reports is in A/B testing, so campaign optimizations. Okay, so how does the attribution model actually work? As I said, there are different attribution models available. This, what you're seeing in front of you, is just a kind of mock-up of what a candidate's journey might look like. Imagine that you have a user and you want to target them on LinkedIn, for example, and you're trying to get them to apply for a job. So let's look at these steps in a bit further detail. Imagine that the first touch point that a user has is they see your LinkedIn post. It could be paid or organic, but they don't actually decide to visit your website on it yet. At that point in time, Google Analytics still does not know of this user. However, you're also running a retargeting campaign in this example, And on the second touch point, the person gets retargeted and they eventually do click on the ad. In this scenario, Google Analytics would then actually measure this user coming in. If you have your advertisement tagged with the correct UTM codes, so in this example here, you see under the second touch point, LinkedIn _Q2 DevOps. That's just an example campaign name that one might use. A person coming in through this traffic would be classified as a source of LinkedIn, a medium of paid, and a campaign of, as the name already states, LinkedIn Q2 DevOps. So whatever events happen in that second touch point, in that session, that will be attributed to that campaign and source combination. But of course, we would like to know which combination resulted in an actual conversion. And it's hard to do that if you have multiple different sources and campaigns and mediums within someone's journey to actually convert. So this is where attribution comes in. Let's continue this timeline forward and assume that a person has visited your website, and then in the third touch point, they eventually organically, directly search for your brand name on Google and return to your website. This session would come in as direct. Potentially, they consume content that supports their journey into converting later on. But of course, this campaign was not paid for, so this session would be direct traffic. In the fourth touch point, let's assume that someone recognizes your brands on Indeed, for example, and they click on the ad, visit your vacancy page on your website, but they don't apply yet. At this point in time, you have another campaign in the journey to deal with, and that is Indeed Q2 DevOps. So let's assume then after that, that somebody in a different session actually does convert, and then you look at the full picture of all the campaigns that have been essentially supporting this conversion, and then you have to decide, okay, which campaign deserves the credit for this conversion. So the models, what they do is they spread the credit for that conversion over the different touch points. Like I said, you have certain ones like data-driven, first click, last click, position-based. They all essentially allocate this credit for the attribution in different ways. First click, for example, in this case, the whole conversion would go to the first LinkedIn Q2 DevOps campaign. Last click would be directly, for example. And data-driven, what that does is it takes advantage of some machine learning capabilities in order to programmatically assign values to all the different touch points. So it could be that Indeed gets 0.3% of the attribution value, for example. And then later on, when you're trying to query, hey, where are my conversions coming from? Eventually, the calculation takes place, and all your sources would gain X amount of conversions based on that model. All right, so hopefully attribution is clear. It's a very big part of understanding how to look at your data. So very important part. What can you then eventually do with the data that you're gathering? Well, there's a couple of integrations possible. Of course, the most versatile one is a CSV file. You can usually integrate that into any system that you use. Apart from that, you can directly export to a Google Sheet in your browser. This is useful for very quick manual analysis of certain tables that you might be looking at. There's an option for integrating with BigQuery. Now, BigQuery is essentially based on SQL, SQL, and it's a data warehousing system. This is a little bit technical, so you should definitely consider consulting with an expert on that subject. However, GA4 has the option to automatically create a link between GA4 and BigQuery, and then you have a daily export to BigQuery of your events coming in automatically. So there's good integration options with GA4. On top of that, you can of course always use the GA4 API, although this is very technical. So a better solution to this would be using, for example, the native connector of GA4 to Looker Studio. This is in essence using the API, but it's way more simple, completely simplified. So Looker Studio, for example, is great to build dashboards with your GA4 data. Then what these, for example, look like? Well, here's an example of a mock-up board that we work with at VONQ, for example. This would all be GA4 data shown in here that you can funnel into your dashboard through the native GA4 connector. Okay, let's look at the demo account. I think this is the most interesting part. Hopefully everything loads correctly. Yeah, okay, perfect. So as I mentioned before, you have the admin menu. When I go to the home section, this is essentially what you'll see for the first time logging in. This is the main page. As you can see in the top left, I am currently in Google's GA4 merge shop. This is a demo environment, so don't be too critical on what the exact numbers are here. They don't make too much sense, but just so that you understand how the platform works, this is taken from Google's merge shop. They run this as you know, a small little support thing for Google Analytics. Okay, so let's go into the admin section again. Right, so you have your account column, as I discussed previously. You have your properties column. Underneath that, you have your links. Let's just go through some settings here. When you're setting up an account for the first time, you, of course, eventually have to fill out all your account settings. Important things for most countries that deal with GDPR, for example, is that you turn off Google products and services data sharing. I would advise that you turn that off because usually you don't want to automatically share the data with Google. There are settings in the technical implementation that you can add certain conditions onto when you should share and when not. This, for example, would be great in order to integrate with your cookie banner, for example. So whenever a user actually consents to being tracked, then you can enable that setting programmatically in the backend. Potentially discuss with an expert to help you with that setup. Otherwise, just make sure that this setting is turned off. Another great feature is to turn on modeling contributions and business insights. This enables, of course, the machine learning capabilities a bit more. It allows you to anonymously benchmark your websites to industry standards. It's a great way of just seeing where you're at and how you're performing compared to competitors anonymously. Okay, and then in the bottom is the data processing terms. This as well I briefly mentioned in the presentation, but this should be accepted for every account. It has to do with GDPR. It's mainly giving Google the permission and letting Google know that you've gotten the permission of users to actually process their data. Okay, account management. This is where you can add users. As you can see, I'm the only one connected to this merge shop because I don't have admin access of this merge shop. You can add filters on the account level. So, for example, filtering out someone's IP or potentially you want to filter out certain domains from your data, you can do that on the account level. It affects all of the properties. You also have filters on your property level. When you go to data settings and data filters, this would then only filter the data for each property. Okay, so let's go through the property settings real quick. As mentioned, there is a setup assistant. You can really just follow this step by step and have a good GA4 setup. However, there are certain things like linking Google Ads that is not necessary, that some people might not need to work with. So if you want a sleek implementation, you can just follow along with what you exactly need to implement in this demo. Okay, so in the property settings, you can choose your category, time zone, and currency. Time zone and currency is actually relevant because this affects what the default values are in your reporting. So all of the advertising reports for this property would be in dollars. The time zone, so your date selection and everything like that, would roll on from day to day based on the time zone that you select here. So it is important that you select the right one. Industry category, this is relevant for the benchmarking thing, but it's not the most important thing to have an incredibly accurate selection of. Okay, let's go to the data stream. As I said before, this is essentially what a data stream represents is a source of data. This one is a web data stream. There's different versions. You can have iOS, Android, or web. This is a web data stream for Google's domain shop.googlemerchandisestore.com. When you go into that, you have a stream ID, you have a measurement ID. The measurement ID is something that your tracking specialist would need in order to actually set up the tracking on your website. Besides that, there's a couple of great features here. Enhanced measurement is one of them. This one, whenever you add a web data stream to your website, if enhanced measurement is turned on, you will automatically also start getting some extra event data. So things like scrolls, outbound clicks, page views, this automatically comes from the base installation of GA4 if you have enhanced measurement turned on. So it's a great way if you're not the most technical person or not the most handy with Tag Manager to still get some extra event data from your website without manually having to track things yourself. If you want to continue that trend and create more events without actually entering Tag Manager, you can do that through here as well by modifying events when they come in. So, for example, you can make ruling that when an event name equals something, change the name to something else. You can add specific conditions like create a new event if there is a specific combination of parameters available in that event. So you can essentially build on top of the events that you already have with the modify feature. Same thing with create custom events. The biggest thing that is relevant on the Google tag section is when you configure your tag settings, you have the option to configure multiple domains. As you can see, this Google tag right now is only tracking the destination North America and Canada web for this stream name. When you configure your domains, you can add potential subdomains here or other domains. Your ATS, for example, you can add here as well in order to all get one reporting overview of multiple sites. Right now, I can't edit this because we're in the demo environment, but below here, you can add multiple conditions to add more domains. Okay, that's the basis of the main assets for your property. Within each property, the events start to stream in eventually. So in this demo environment, you see quite a lot of events that you will not have in your standard property when you make that. Let's just maximize this here. Okay, so one interesting event, for example, is the first visit event. When you click on that event, it brings you to the events overview for that event. So right now we see graphs, different parameters that you can select for that event, where they occur, different demographic data, where they happen on the pages that they happen, for example. You can see that there's 18,000 first visits of a user to the home page. When we go back to admin and events, here you can also modify and create the events, as we mentioned in the property settings as well. So this is essentially, if you need an event in your property, it has to show up in this events column. And you can track, for example, whether, let's say you're tracking a button for your campaign for a month long, and you notice that the change from month to month all of a sudden drops drastically, then you know that something might be wrong with either the campaign traffic coming to that event or the event tracking itself. So this is a great way to just make sure that any events that are coming in, they're coming in correctly. You can check whether the right parameters are available, etc. Like I said, everything is an event. So before, what would be a page view hit in UA is now just page_view as a separate event. Okay, so there is a little mark as conversions button for each event. This is a label that you can give an event to make it a conversion. Of course, the conversions are the resources that benefit from attribution modeling. So the most important events that you have here, mainly it should be, well, usually it should be at the end of a candidate funnel. For example, the last application form send event. That might be a conversion that you want to track. You could create an event for that and then mark it as a conversion. It ends up in the conversions tab, and then you will be able to use that in your reporting. There's also audiences. So based on certain ruling, if users come in with a certain traffic combination, so LinkedIn, Facebook, maybe you want to categorize them as paid social media, you can create an audience of that, add the ruling, and then later use that audience to either integrate with Google Ads and start targeting that audience, or just use the audience for your reporting, just to be able to segment properly. You also have segments for that though, so those are a bit easier to use, a bit more accessible as well. So if you don't intend on actually integrating with Google Ads, segments might be a better way for you to analyze your data. All right, custom definitions. This is what I briefly discussed on if you want to gather extra data from your website and categorize it into a dimension. Maybe you have job categories, for example, besides just the vacancies themselves. You can create a dimension for each category. So you might have an IT category, you might have a account management category, things like that. The data is not standard available in GA, so you can make a custom dimension for that, link it to all your events, and then whenever, for example, a vacancy view event fires, then you also add the category of that job where it might be occurring. Metrics, this is for example, summing up revenue for certain events. It's mainly, the main benefit of it would be for e-commerce. So if you're not having a web shop or something like that, custom metrics will usually not be used too much. Because a lot of times this is meant for tracking values of things. So you see as well, the one in here is unit of measurement, currency, revenue, cost. That's the standard one that is coming with this merge shop. Okay, the data settings. This is quite important. You need to make sure that user data collection acknowledgement, that this is agreed. What this essentially says is, as a entity using Google Analytics, you are declaring that you have collected the consent of a user to actually track their data. So this is a very important part of making sure that you're in line with GDPR rules. Important parts here as well are that Google Signals data collection should be off standard, and the advanced settings for allowed ads personalization should always be off as well. Location and device settings are fine to use. All right, data retention, make sure that this is on the maximum. The maximum is 14 months, but I think standard is 2 months. So this is how long the property itself actually holds on to the data that it's collected. So you want to make sure that that is the highest possible. This eventually gets deleted once a user is inactive for 14 months. So any data associated to that user will be deleted after that time frame. All right, data filters. I think I already discussed this as well. This is to just filter out internal traffic, for example, on the property level. Channel groups is important as well. We discussed that you can add certain conditions and certain rules in order to kind of group the different channels into certain audiences. For example, you might have a social media group. I think the default channel groups, for example, has, paid social, for example. The rules that this is based on is, okay, when the default channel group equals paid social, then we funnel it into a channel group called paid social. This is fully customizable, so if you want to define your own custom channels and fully integrate with your own architecture of UTM tracking, then you can do that in channel grouping as well. Okay, data import. If you have external sources of data, you can import that through here. It has to be in a CSV format usually. It must be well, formatted properly in terms of which dimensions and metrics and stuff you have in there. So there's a little bit of nuance in how you do it. However, data import is a great tool to use if you ever need external sources in GA4 itself. Reporting identity. When this is unblended, then you actually enable the modeled data. The way that this actually attributes certain events and sessions to one particular user, maybe it's over multiple devices, is best to always have unblended because it uses multiple different sources to define what a user actually is. And observed uses a little less. It uses only the top 3, and it doesn't use any modeling. So the estimates are a little bit different. Okay, attribution settings as well. You can select different look-back windows for how long you would like to look at the different touch points. Yeah, let's look at the debug view. If you work with Tag Manager and you are debugging your tracking setup, then any events that come in here in this timeline will be from that debug environment. So this is a very good way to isolate what you're actually testing to see how things are coming into your analytics property. If you need any help with the setup of your properties, of course, VONQ can help you with this. We have a whole team available to assist you if you need that. But let's continue. Here is the reports section. There, in most properties, not in the demo, below here there is a little library button as well. Here you can save custom reports. There are standard, the real-time, and then lifecycle and user collections is what they call it. And under each collection, you have options for different reports. For example, under the lifecycle collection, there's an acquisition section, and there are 3 reports available for you by default. There's also 2 different types of reports. In each report section, you see a lot of overview. So acquisition overview, for example, engagement overview, demographics overview. This is a type of report. And what that report is essentially these KPI cards. You can select them yourself, you can customize them yourself, and eventually save them in the library, which is unfortunately invisible in the demo account, but it should be right here. You can customize those, you can publish them. You also have the option for detailed reports, and that looks like this. This always takes the structure of a few little charts up top. You have the option to either enable or disable one. So you might have, for example, just one large timeline at the top. And it's always followed with a report in tabular form below that. So you can select as many dimensions, as many metrics you want to compare and analyze with each other. And depending on whatever filtering you select here, you might see the charts and the data change based off that. Essentially, what acquisition is how users are coming into your site, where they're coming from. All your campaign data, for example, should be found in acquisition. Engagement is what they actually do on your website. So, for example, the events is one of the report that is in here. Pages and screens, what content do they actually consume? Specifically, landing pages is, of course, where they initiate their sessions on. Monetization, this is not the most useful thing for most people. It's just if you work with a lot of revenue and shopping carts and things like that, then you can actually integrate that with GA4. There's a lot of different e-commerce features in GA4 available. Yeah, I think for most people, it's not the most relevant. Demographics, this is only enabled if you enable demographic details. For the demo environment, I believe it is enabled. And this just shows you location, devices, interests even. So as you see, a lot of technophiles are interested in the Google Merch Shop. And then tech here is more about people's devices, what operating system they use, etc. In general, it's quite a similar menu structure to Universal Analytics. There's just a few little nuanced details that you have to get used to when working with GA4. Okay, so those are the standard reports. Let's get into the Explore feature. This is probably the most interesting one. I believe I should have had a pre-built Explorer, but doesn't matter. Let's just go through it again. This is the main Explore tab, the main deal. You have different tabs that you can, different pages that you can add here, and there's different report templates that you can select. Freeform always starts out in tabular. However, you can suggest different visualizations. The first thing that you always want to do is make sure that you're reporting on the right time frame, of course. For now, let's just select the last 30 days. Then you would like to add all the dimensions and metrics that you would like to actually start querying with. So let's say that we want to know what kind of campaigns people are coming from and which campaigns are showing the most engaged sessions versus bounce sessions. You would add the dimension session campaign as the traffic source, and then import that. And as you can see, it adds it to our exploration. Now, it's not yet in our actual report. That is where this tab settings column is for. But before we get into that, let's add a metric to combine with this session campaign dimension. And the one we're going to select is engaged sessions. All right, we're going to import that one. And here you can do a few things. You can either drag the dimension to your value, or you can right-click and click on Engage Sessions as the value, and it automatically adds it to your report. For the columns, I will do campaign, and then for each row, I'm going to add another one that is session source. All right, session source in the row. Okay, so this turns into a pivot table, and it's pivoted on campaign in the rows, or in the columns, and sources for those engaged sessions in the rows. There's an option to select either bar, plain text, or heat map, for example. It's a great way of just very quickly seeing, okay, which combination of campaign versus source is delivering me the most engaged sessions. You can limit the amount as well, so you can go all the way up to 500 in Explore. And then you will analyze much more data. Okay, so that is a table. Of course, there's more than just that. Let's do a line graph. Something that might be interesting for line graph is, for example, amount of views. And we want to see which pages are being viewed. Let's take page, path, and screen class. Okay, so in the breakdown, we want that path to be shown, and the value that we want to see is the amount of views. Okay, so here you see a line graph split up by all the different pages. You can select a certain page as well. So either if you know the page already yourself, then you can add a filter to the report. Then you would just select that dimension, page path, and let's say I only want to see the home page that is just a / here. Then I would say exactly matches / and apply. Now I only see the views for that home page of the Google Merge Shop. All right, let's remove that filter for now. As you can see, anomaly detection is on. You can set a sensitivity for how often and in what range Google will assume that, for example, a certain spike in traffic is an anomaly. On all the lines themselves, there are little dots, and this is where the anomaly is actually represented. So for example, this top peak here on the home page, as you can see, an anomaly here was detected, and that's because, according to the history of that page, we are categorizing this as an outlier. So you can see that there is an expected versus actual counter. So you also see how far off the anomaly might actually go. When you select, for example, a page, you also now see that the graph has changed. There's a blue kind of hovered filter over that line. And this is showing you the expected range of values that are considered not to be an anomaly. So the points that you see, they also fall outside of that blue line, as well on the bottom as on the top. The time frame you can change on how many days before it should train on. The longer you change it to, the more data of the past it's going to take into consideration to make an estimate of what range is acceptable versus not. Okay, let's look at a very useful one that is path exploration. And let us put the first step on page title and screen class. All right, so what this report does is you can select an event, you can filter on the first event. Oh, right now I see it's on event count, by the way. Let's add views. Actually, no. Let's keep it on. Let's keep it on event. Let's keep it on event count. So, when in this report, when you want to analyze this report further, you can click on any of these paths, and they will expand to the next step. So, for example, when a session is started and a user is on the home page, you can extend that out and see, okay, where do these people actually go to from the home page? You see that 588 of them go to men's unique apparel. You can click on that one and it expands from there as well. So this is a great way of looking into how deep the traffic goes, how much fall off you have between the different steps. This, of course, is also filterable in terms of campaigns and origins. You can add a segment here, select one of the templates, and select acquisition. It's a great template for creating a segment based off of the UTM values. So if you don't want to make your own segment by hand, then you can just use this template. Let's add a filter on source for this segment and say we want all the sources that contains, actually, let's not say contains, let's just say Google. So let's say it exactly matches Google. And we're going to title this segment Google traffic. Save and apply. Let's create another segment, templates, acquisition. And in this one, we are going to say, hopefully social media is available in this demo. It is not. Okay, perfect. Potentially Facebook is. Yeah, Facebook is. Okay, great. Let's say that this segment is called Facebook traffic. And we save that. All right. Now we're looking at the Google traffic segment. We can swap that out with Facebook in order to see how this graph changes. This works, by the way, for all the different reports as well. So when you add segments to compare, you can add those and the whole graph changes, as you can see. Let's add Google traffic and Facebook traffic. Let me zoom out a little bit for you guys as well. All right, so here you see the segment Google traffic. It has a certain amount of value. I think the Facebook traffic is not actually getting any data for this query, so it just doesn't show up. But you would have a second column here for all of your Facebook traffic in this color, in this purple color. So that's kind of how segments work. I realize that the time is quite short to the end, so I would like to go back to our questions and make sure that we have some time for a brief Q&A. Hopefully you all got the chance to ask your questions to Alex.
And if there are any questions, yeah, we of course can answer that during our Q&A now.
All right, I believe there are not too many questions actually. So I'd like to thank you all for coming to the webinar. Perhaps Suad would like to say a few words.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Yeah, after this webinar, we are going to give you a short survey, and yeah, please be welcome to fill this in. And if there are any questions, of course, we are happy to help you with that. And thanks again for listening and attending the webinar.